You've heard of Secret St. Louis. Now there's Secret America. Details next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. Well, we all have a good secret. David Baugher has some secrets he's sharing with us, so welcome him to City Corner. Hi, David. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm happy to be here.
Your new book, Secret America, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. Of course, is a follow-up to a book that we talked to you, was it a couple of years ago, maybe? Mm-hmm. Which is Secret St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was so successful. Actually, the publisher has kind of expanded the concept to other cities, and it's now being done in other cities as well. So it's kind of started something. It's a lot of fun.
Well, people might wonder, whose secrets are you telling?
It is a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. So it really looks at things that people who have even been here their whole lives wouldn't necessarily know about. Those sort of obscure facts and interesting places and people and so forth that are out there. And once you really start investigating, you find there's a lot of things out there that you're like, man, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. And so that's what I try to do on a national level as a mission of St. Louis.
Well, before we talk about your new book, back to the old one, were there a couple of Secret St. Louis items that you got a lot of response to in particular?
One of my favorites was always the Weldon Spring Disposal Cell. It's basically a nuclear waste dump where you can just sort of go and visit and climb to the top of if you'd like, which I did. It was a lot of fun. It's a very nice view from up there. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly one of the more unusual sites. I even saw a sort of very disused picnic table down at the bottom of the site, which is kind of interesting to have a picnic at a nuclear waste dump. I never really thought about that. But it was interesting. They have an interpretive center there and the whole 9 yards. It's a lot of fun.
Uh-huh. Well, you're not originally from St. Louis, but you've lived here a pretty long time.
Oh, well, actually, I am originally from St. Louis.
Like I said, you're originally from St. Louis.
Yes. So I'm a native St. Louisan, which is, I think to write the book, you almost have to be a native St. Louisan to write Secret St. Louis. And so I have lived here my whole life, and of course I'm also a lifelong American, so I was able to write Secret America.
How'd the idea for the first book come up to begin with?
It was originally pitched as sort of a St. Louis scavenger hunt is the way I really discussed it with my publisher, the idea of being able to look at all these different sites that people could go to, sort of summer road trip to, and just have these different ideas about, man, I want to know where I can go and where I can see this, that, and the other thing that's obscure history. And they sort of came together slowly into an actual book.
But how would you find some of these places? I mean, where would these ideas come from?
Well, a lot of them just came out of my head because I already knew these things over, 40 years of living here. I was able to kind of have these things sort of sticking to the neurons of my brain, and it's like, I know this or that random fact. And then when I would start to Google things, I would find more and more interesting things that were out there, and I would go ahead and fact check them and authoritatively make sure that they were correct. And whenever I would find that these fascinating bits of history had happened in St. Louis, I was able to, go forward with it.
Well, being from here and growing up here, then I can see how you'd have a background and sort of a knowledge of things to be able to find things in St. Louis. So how'd you take that to the next level? I mean, you haven't lived all over the country.
No, I haven't lived. I have traveled all over the country to some degree, though. I've been to 46 states. Matter of fact, for the book, at one point I did something interesting. I traveled all the way to Cincinnati and back by car in a single day, which is something I'd never quite done before.
That sounds like something I would have done in college.
Yeah, it kind of felt like I should have been in college when I was doing it, because when you're older, you have a little less energy to do things like that.
Well, so why'd you go to Cincinnati for one day?
There was something I needed to take a picture of in Indiana, another thing in Illinois, but the thing just outside Cincinnati was actually a small coffee shop that hosts a Jerry Springer podcast, which is not related to his television show at all, and they basically just discuss folk music and politics and other things, and it's just weird because it's like he was mayor of Cincinnati, which a lot of people don't know. Right. And he had this interesting history there, so I went ahead and took a picture of the coffee house, and it has nothing to do with his TV show, which is just what makes it so fascinating and bizarre.
So if it had nothing to do with this TV show, they didn't throw shoes or anything?
No, nobody throwing chairs or no bodyguard necessary, anything like that. But it was great because it was like, this guy does a podcast at a unknown coffee shop in Cincinnati, and nobody knows about it, even though he's a national figure. So I really wanted to capture interesting things like that that are out there that people don't know about.
Did it take you longer to do the book on America as opposed to St. Louis because it was new territory?
To some degree, the getting the photographs was more complex.
You didn't take them all yourself?
No, I didn't for this one. I did for Secret St. Louis, pretty much, but or almost all of them, but not for the Secret America. But it was interesting to research it. But a lot of it was done from media sources and from other authoritative sources that were out there where I could find the information. And thanks to the miracle of the internet, there's a lot of information available.
Internet makes writing a lot easier, doesn't it?
It does, as long as you get the right sources that are actually authoritative and that you make sure you're going to sources that have the real information and not
Don't believe everything. I've made that mistake with interviews before.
Yeah. You don't want to get into that fake news.
Wikipedia is not always correct.
No.
I can tell you that.
No. I do not. It's, things like Wikipedia are a nice place to find out about things.
To start.
Yeah, to kind of start out with. But you don't want to source something to Wikipedia. You want to go find the actual source and the actual place.
I remember I did an interview with Count Basie once, and I had all these questions worked up about something I read, and he didn't know what I was talking about. Let's look at some images from the new edition of your book, which is Secret America, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. Well, what's so weird about a flag?
Well, that's actually the part about California. There's actually a lot of debate over where the name California comes from.
I never heard any talk about that.
Yeah, but people don't really know, but the leading theory is that it's actually the only state name that comes from Arabic. Specifically, it has to do with the fact that there was what basically amounts to a bad romance novel in like the 15 or 1600s in Spain and Portugal and it involved this main character named Queen Calafia. And that was it was actually a feminine version, probably very much of the term caliph from caliphate. And that's where California probably comes from, although it's not confirmed, but because people don't know for sure. But that's the leading theory, is that it actually derives from Arabic.
But we don't know what individual came up with that or why.
Well, she was a fictional character, and she was in this sort of lurid romance novel. And at some point, they ended up kind of apparently naming that region after her. Is the thought. There's actually roads in California that are named Calafia.
Really?
Calafia Avenue, and there's the one in Oakland. There's a couple of California cities have roads that are named after her. But it's just sort of a fascinating thing because most people, most of our state names come from either native languages here in the Americas, or come from French, or come from English or place names or so forth.
It's kind of appropriate though, if any state's going to have a name from a romance novel, California.
Yeah, it was sort of the swashbuckling adventure novel, about the adventures of some fellow, and but it ended up being like retranslated and so forth. Yeah.
Let's look at another image from your book, Secret America.
This is one of the more chilling ones in the book. Basically, it happened in North Carolina in 1961, where a plane broke up over the state, and a nuclear weapon on board fell to Earth and began dutifully arming itself. And 4 of the 5 safety interlocks had armed by the time it hit the ground. If the 5th one had armed, we would only have 1 Carolina now.
So this is the site where it actually landed?
It's not the sign is not on the exact site. The exact site is on private property, but they did put up the sign to commemorate it. It's called the Goldsboro Incident. And it's also not the only incident that's happened with nuclear weapons. There's a great book out called Command and Control that looks at many of the different incidents that have happened, and the author chronicled 700 different incidents that he called significant involving nuclear weapons. And if you want to know what a significant incident is involving a nuclear weapon, it's called any incident involving a nuclear weapon.
Right.
And there have been times like that. One incident in Arkansas, for instance, was caused when a worker dropped a socket from a wrench, and it hit an ICBM and eventually caused a fire and explosion that threw something like a 9 megaton warhead a pretty good distance.
Wow.
So these things do happen. And
700 though, that kind of surprises me.
There are a lot of incidents with nuclear weapons during the Cold War that occurred, and people don't really know about them. This one particularly, I don't think came to light significantly until about 2013 when they started to declassify some things.
Oh, that's fascinating. Let's look at another image from your book.
That's the butter laws. The kind of illustrates that concept. A lot of people don't realize now, but back when butter was when margarine was first introduced, it met a lot of resistance in certain parts of the country, particularly the dairy states of the upper Midwest, and most particularly Wisconsin.
There was a butter battle?
Yeah, that's what it was. There was a legal battle over it, and they put taxes on it to basically try to kill margarine. The butter farmers also lobbied against it, and at one point they had laws basically saying you couldn't make margarine the same color as butter. So they made you dye it things like pink or black or other unappetizing colors that they.
Who knew that?
That was just Congress would pass laws, states would pass laws involving taxes or other strange things. They had butter smuggling or margarine smuggling. Housewives would actually form little smuggling operations to bring margarine across state lines and things like that. But people don't realize that there was quite a lot of resistance. Wisconsin actually still has, I believe, butter laws in the books. At least they did as of a few years ago. That involve certain restrictions on butter.
Well, all the things that get smuggled through airports and at borders and things, it's hard to believe the butter was a big deal.
At one point, the margarine companies actually started including dye packs, so you could dye your own, because they weren't allowed to make it yellow. So they would include dye packs so you could color your own butter once you bought it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there was a lot of fights over it, and in Congress and in state legislatures.
Let's look at the next image. I want to go on the record though. I'm all for butter.
Yeah. Now this is interesting.
This does not look as funny as the last one.
No, but it is relatively heartwarming. This is a fellow named Daryl Davis, who I had the privilege of interviewing.
Gentleman on the left.
Yes, who I spoke to by phone, and that's one of his friends. This always gets a lot of attention because people are like, what? But the reality is Davis befriends people in the Ku Klux Klan. He makes friends with them, and it all began
Number one, I'm surprised that's possible.
Yeah, I was too, but this is a remarkable individual. He's very interesting to talk to, and he's actually a jazz musician. He was playing a gig one night, and a white fellow came in, was talking to him. And during the course of the conversation, he mentions, oh, yes, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan here locally. And Davis didn't end the conversation. He continued talking to the fellow. They made friends with each other, and eventually they became so friendly that he eventually gave his Klan robe to Davis and left the Klan.
What?
And so then Davis said, well, can you introduce me to more people in the Klan? And he said, well, he was kind of reluctant to do it, but he did. And soon enough, he's now got about 40 Klan robes. He just makes friends with people in the Klan, and eventually they hand him his their Klan robe and leave the Klan.
Gee, what an astounding concept. Maybe like judge a person as an individual?
It absolutely is. And I mean, he doesn't argue with them. He doesn't approach them confrontationally. He's just friendly, and he talks to them, and he listens to them, and he has respectful conversations.
Has he got any kind of, I would think would be a national news story.
It has been covered a little bit. It's not been covered as much as you would think, though, but he's definitely made a lot of progress. He pretty much devastated the Ku Klux Klan in the state of Maryland simply by making friends with people. It's a remarkable story, an amazing story.
Why didn't somebody think of that earlier?
It's quite amazing. Perhaps some lessons for today's overheated political dialogue.
Oh, wow. Gee, on that note, I want to think about that one. We need to take a break right now, but Dave, when we come back, we'll talk more about your book, Secret America, with David Baugher. We'll be right back.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. We're talking with David Baugher today about his new book, Secret America. It's a follow-up to Secret St. Louis. So this one, Secret America, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. And of course, your original book, Secret St. Louis, David, was full of St. Louis stuff. Secret America is strange, interesting facts about places all across the country. Mm-hmm. But you do have one St. Louis item in your new edition.
I do, yeah. City Museum is included. I tried to include things that people wouldn't necessarily know about based on the readership. And when it comes to the readership of this book, of course, it's a national book. So I wanted to kind of expose the idea that City Museum is a pretty unique place. So I went ahead and I did include that in the book. I wouldn't have included it in Secret St. Louis just because everybody in St. Louis knows about City Museum already. I wanted to cover things in Secret St. Louis that St. Louisans wouldn't necessarily know about. They wouldn't know about.
I like what you said about there, that you never know what it is by the name. Like if I was visiting St. Louis and I was looking at, things to do in St. Louis City Museum, I might skip right by that.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's
it's
important.
not what you think it is.
No, it isn't. And I wanted to let the nation know about this great best-kept secret that we have here in town.
Right. Well, let's look at some other secrets from across the country from your new book, Secret America. We'll take a look at this next image, and I've stood in that exact same place several times.
There are a couple of interesting Lincoln facts in the book. A lot of people don't realize.
That's like a memorial in D.C.
Yes, in particular. Well, there's one about a secret room behind Lincoln's head in Mount Rushmore.
Right.
But this is actually the memorial in D.C. And if you look at his armrests there, you can see there's these sort of bundled reeds. A lot of people don't realize, but that's actually, amazingly enough, a symbol of fascism, which is they're called fasces. And they are actually a symbol of political fascism.
Well, what was the message they were trying to get?
Well, they also happen to be a symbol, going back further, of just sort of ancient power, dating back to the Romans, which is where the fascists got it originally. And so what you'll find is if you go all over D.C., these symbols are everywhere. And it sounds bizarre to say it, but
they weren't put there to represent fascism, were they?
Not necessarily, no. They were more put there because they were an ancient symbol of power, but they do actually represent fascism. They are the symbol of the fascist movement.
I'm never going to be able to look at that again.
And it is a weird thought, and they're in bridges, they're in all the statues and things like that. And there was a certain sympathy back at the time some of these memorials being put up towards fascists. A lot of people liked Benito Mussolini in the country at the time when these, this is before World War II. There are a lot of people thought he was sort of an innovator and so forth. So at the time, he did not have quite the negative association that, of course, fascism would gain later. So that may have played into it as well. But it's an interesting fact that if you look at many of these buildings, bridges, and so forth, and they'll have those bundled reeds, that insignia, which the fascists would later adopt.
I'll notice that next time. Never paid any attention to that before. Let's take a look at the next image.
Yeah, that's the down at Daytona, of course. A lot of people don't realize, though, that NASCAR actually has its roots in moonshining, a criminal enterprise, in fact. The reason a lot of these guys ran these races originally, the reason they had fast cars in the first place,
to get away.
Yeah, they were being chased by the cops. They were smuggling alcohol. Matter of fact, Junior Johnson, I think it was, one of the original racers from those days, he was eventually pardoned by President Reagan for some of his earlier incidents with
They didn't smuggle any butter on those?
No butter smuggling, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a fascinating story that NASCAR actually has that linkage to moonshining early on that a lot of people don't know about.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's look at the next one.
Oh, that's a wonderful story about a fellow by the name of Nobuo Fujita. And Mr. Fujita has the distinction of being the only person to ever bomb the United States of America from an enemy aircraft during a time of war. He took off in an ultralight aircraft from a submarine-launched craft, actually, just off the coast of Oregon, and he dropped a couple of firebombs in an Oregon forest, and with the goal of setting it on fire.
And when was this?
This is during World War II. And so
And why?
The idea was to set the forest on fire and create a problem for for responders and so forth, and hopefully divert resources and so forth. The bombs were dropped successfully. They did create a fire, although it wasn't a particularly serious fire, from what I understand. But they did create a fire anyway. But the great story is that later on, in the I think it was the 1960s, some years later, a local town, Brookings, Oregon, basically decided, well, this is a neat bit of trivia, so we're going to invite him over to, maybe talk to him and have him, give a speech at the Chamber of Commerce, whatever it was. And so they invited him to come from Japan, and he apparently got lost in the translation. He took it more as he was being called to account for his crimes. And he took it so seriously that he literally brought along his family's 400-year-old samurai sword with the intention of possibly committing ritual suicide to appease the town people if they were angry. But in fact, when he got there, the townspeople were very friendly and everything, and he was so overjoyed by them being so friendly that he decided to go ahead and donate his samurai sword to the local library.
If I didn't know better, I would think you were making all this stuff up.
I am not. This is a real story. It really happened, and he formed a friendship with the town that eventually went on for decades, and on his deathbed, the town named him an honorary citizen of the town that he bombed. So
wow.
it's a remarkable thing that this actually happened, and he planted trees of peace at the site of his bombs and things like that, because he was rather embarrassed about the whole thing, but he was just overwhelmed by the warmth that he received, the warm welcome.
Wow. Let's keep moving on.
Yeah. Oh, that has to do with the site of in Milwaukee. There's a Little League field there, in the parking lot of what is now the Brewers' home park, and that Little League field has where home plate used to sit for County Stadium, old County Stadium that used to be there. Well, County Stadium is also the site of a fellow named Harvey Haddocks, who pitched what is probably the best game ever pitched in Major League history. And he lost that game. He took the loss on it. He held the other team completely spellbound for 12 plus innings. Into the 13th inning, he took a perfect game, and before he finally gave up a hit.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah. Oh, that has to do with the what's called the Pig War. The United States and Britain almost went to war over a pig that one side killed. This was up in Washington State, and it's still marked. It's a fascinating bit of history.
Let's move on.
That has to do with the beginnings of the internet. That room is on the UCLA campus, room 3420 Bolter Hall, and it's where the internet was born. The very first message ever sent on the internet, in case you're interested, was LO, L-O. It was supposed to be login, but the internet crashed.
Mm-hmm. Let's just keep moving through these in the time we have left.
That's actually a complex one. Burger King, that's not associated with
Burger King is complex?
That's not associated with the actual chain.
Oh.
It's an independent restaurant in Mattoon, Illinois, and the federal government, due to a court case involving trademarks, has prohibited the Burger King chain from ever opening a restaurant within 20 miles of Mattoon, Illinois, because that independently owned restaurant exists that has nothing to do with the Burger King. So they're kind of the original Burger King in Illinois.
I'm sure the residents aren't too upset about that. Yeah. I wish fast food was farther away from my house.
It was. Well, I mean, it is fast food, but it's just not corporate fast. It's not but it's a federal court decision, and actually had an important role in trademark law.
Okay. Let's look at more images from your book, Secret America.
That's actually the Jerry Springer podcast that I mentioned earlier in Cincinnati.
We'll go on.
That has to do. That's a shot of Pittsburgh. Has to do with the fact of why Pittsburgh. There seems to be so much confusion about whether it has an H in the name. At one point,
I don't think I ever could spell Pittsburgh.
Yeah, a lot of people can't. It was probably originally pronounced Pittsboro, but there was a lot of changes to the way names were done and standardized in this country. And so for a while, Pittsburgh didn't have an H because it was removed forcibly by the federal government and then put back later on. So this involves sports team names, newspaper names. They all had to change and then go back.
David, I'm curious, in your book, I happen to notice your dedication. You dedicated the book to your mother. And you said something about because she made you kind of like look at the world in a different way. I'm just curious about that.
Well, trivia, you know, it has always been, and my mother certainly contributed to kind of a love of trivia and a love of interesting facts and interesting ways of viewing the world. So that's what this book was really looking at, is interesting ways of looking at the world and kind of viewing the world.
Were you into those trivia games growing up?
I did. I've always loved trivia. And especially weird facts. The idea of different facts and different, different things and different views of the world.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Ron Ellis's trivia book, St. Louis Trivia?
I'm not off the top of my head, but
I'm in it.
Oh, is that right?
I asked him. I said, "Did you put me in your trivia book because I'm trivial?" And he never gave me a straight answer. Let's look at some more images from your book, though.
Oh, in case you're ever wondering where all that unclaimed baggage goes from the nation's airports, it goes to the Unclaimed Baggage Center in Alabama, where you can, in fact, purchase items that they found in unclaimed baggage.
I bet there's some interesting items.
There are some amazingly interesting items that have come
Like
up.
what?
I think they had a snake that was discovered at one point in one. There was they've discovered Air Force technology in another one that had to be returned to the Air Force.
Wow.
So they actually do make sure that none of the items are dangerous or things like that. But you can get some great bargains there. And they even have sort of a situation where they'll have one lucky customer gets to come up and open their own bag, and and so forth. But most bags, a vast majority of them, are eventually find their owners. But if you have as much air travel, thousands of flights a day in this country, sooner or later somebody's going to lose
after
bags.
somebody doesn't claim it after a certain amount of time, they
if they can't find the owner.
What'd you buy?
I've never actually been to the Unclaimed Baggage Center, but
We've just got a second left. Let's do one real quick if we can.
Oh, that's one of the probably the most interesting and unusual industrial disasters in history in Boston. A molasses tank broke open and was the Great Molasses Flood. It basically destroyed a couple city blocks of Boston.
Wait. Molasses flood.
Molasses flood, a 15-foot tall tidal wave of molasses, actually killed about 21 people and destroyed buildings, crushed everything in its path. And there's still a marker on the site today commemorating it. It's just a bizarre millions of gallons of molasses that destroyed everything.
I'm kind of surprised doing this interview with you. I'm sitting here thinking, I did not know one thing that you've told me today, which amazes me. I bet you get that a lot.
Yeah, and that's always means I've done my job well, if I can enlighten folks about unusual, interesting facts.
Mm-hmm. So what's next?
I don't have any immediate plans, but I'm just trying to, make sure folks know about the book, and they can get a copy of the book at www.secretamerica.com.
There's the information.
Excuse me, it's www.secretamericabooks.com.
We also have the Reedy Press.
Reedy Press also,
too,
yes.
So go to either one. David Baugher, it's wonderful to talk to you again. Continued success, and we'll see you when your next book comes out.
All right, thank you.
You bet. It's a pleasure talking to you. I'm Steve Potter. Thanks for your time. Have a great one. Bye.